What's up, everybody? It's Jeff and Brice. Yo! From Talkumentary. We just spun the wheel of destiny to announce the winner of our Talkumentary contest that gives one of our listeners the opportunity to join us for an episode of our show. We spun the wheel. Check it out on our social media if you want to see that wild and crazy action. But the winner, drumroll please, is Abby Necker. Abby, we'll be in touch with you. Congratulations. We're looking forward to hanging out. You have to choose a documentary that is less than 3 hours long, preferably somewhere in the 1 to 2 hour range. No Ken Burns. No Ken Burns, Brice says. Everybody else, thank you for playing, and stay tuned for the next episode of Talkumentary. Enjoy the act of killing. Yeah.
Selamat datang orang asing di Talkumentary, sebuah pertunjukan di mana kita menonton film dokumenter dan kemudian berkumpul dan membicarakannya.
Talkumentary
Forever!
Talkumentary
Forever!
Talkumentary
Forever!
Silence! Welcome, everyone, to episode 13 of Talkumentary. Today, I am joined by my own private little army, and we're going to be taking on a very difficult adversary this week. Friends, let me introduce to you my two generals. King James, what's up, my friend?
What's up, sir?
Hello. Oh, you need to salute me from now on.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Brice, what's up, buddy?
Hey, not much. How are you?
Nothing. Good. Yeah. Hey, see you later.
Big gulps, huh?
All right. So this week we decided that we were going to round up all of our small-time criminals, and we were going to march our troops against the grueling 167-minute documentary. If you're paying attention, that is 2 hours and 46 minutes and 59 grueling seconds of a documentary called The Act of Killing.
Yang saya harapkan tadi tidak sampai begitu tadi.
This was a tough one, gentlemen, for me. I think in the world of documentaries, you're always going to, there's going to be everything from the easiest thing to watch to something that you probably never want to watch again. And this is toward the latter half of those things, not because it was necessarily like physically difficult to watch, but just the content of this one was pretty brutal. And there was a lot of mixed signals. If I'm using the right terminology there, I think, this was just one that I didn't have a single warm fuzzy throughout the whole thing. So that's a rough start. It was a real conundrum. This was released in 2011. This film follows individuals who participated in the brutal mass killings inside Indonesia after an overthrow of the government in 1965 and 66, as they relive some of their moments from the heinous murders they committed through the production of various types of weird-ass cinematic films. Some felt guilt, others felt justified, but none of them are held accountable, which in my opinion is one of the hardest things to watch about this documentary, is the fact that nobody is held accountable. Directed by Joshua Oppenheimer, Christine Sin, and an anonymous Indonesian person. Produced by, and I'm going to screw these up because some of these are difficult for the native English speaker that I am. Signe Berg Sorensen, Ann Kochke, and Michael Uwemdimo. Sorry, guys, you worked hard on this film, and I'm just butchering your name. But this film was a Final Cut for Real and DK Film production, distributed by Denmark Film Institute and Dog Woof Pictures, streamed on Freevee via Amazon Prime Video. I think, James, you watched it somewhere else.
Yeah, I watched it on Hulu, then Tubi. I did a combination of both of them. So, I'm all over the place.
All right. All of that information that we just said will be in our show notes. Brice, initial reaction, man, before we dig too far into this thing. Thoughts?
Yeah. I think the concept for this documentary was just kind of crazy to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't get less crazy for 3 hours.
Yeah. It's gosh, I stopped halfway through this and took a break for the rest of the night and went upstairs and told Nikki, I don't know how we're going to talk about this one. This is a difficult one to talk about. James, I think you even asked me, like, hey, are we going to pick a different documentary? Because this one's
Right.
tough. And I said, nope, because we already told our devout followers, our fans, that this is the one we're going to do. So we're going to get into this a little bit. But James, what were your first reactions?
Well, my first reactions was like, is this some type of movie about some war people or something with the government? That's my first thought. Then I said, I got to read all this? Oh, my gosh.
Yeah,
I said, well, okay.
that can make for a tough documentary when you have to read subtitles the whole time. I don't mind subtitles. I'm one of those crazy people who has subtitles on most of the time when I watch movies and TV and documentaries, especially when I'm watching docs for this, because, I want to make sure I don't miss any important details or anything. But yeah, it was a difficult one to watch. So this documentary won a whole buttload of acclaim and it was even nominated for even more, including a nomination for an Academy Award for the Best Documentary Feature. It did not win, but I'm not even going to attempt to name all the things that it won and was nominated for. You can look it up. There's a whole bunch. The Act of Killing is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with a 95% tomato meter.
Wow.
With 162 reviews and an audience score of 85% with over 10,000 ratings. So let's get into it. A quick warning before we get into this episode. If you haven't seen this documentary yet, and if you're interested in seeing this documentary, this is your spoiler alert. Go watch it if you want, but I'll also offer up another warning. That the film that we're covering today and by proxy this episode, there will be mentions of some violence, murder, rape, that may not be suitable for all listeners or viewers. Please use your own discretion when going into this one. We'll be right here. We'll be waiting. All right. Let's talk about why we chose to watch The Act of Killing, which I'm sure is what you guys were asking yourself the whole time you were watching this. I actually chose this one, and I will admit that, I knew little to nothing about the military overthrow in Indonesian government in the 60s. I didn't know that these mass killings happened. I had no idea that there were people walking around as free men after killing thousands or even millions of innocent people. And probably the most surprising is maybe not surprising, but it never sits well when, you find out that your own government they very likely played a huge part in allowing all of it, and not just allowing, but instigating a lot of this. But I chose this doc plain and simple because it was rated very highly. One of the documentaries that everyone should see. And for that reason, it's on the list. I had no idea what I was in for, admittedly. I I think I know the answer, but did either of you guys, had you seen this doc or heard of it before we did it for the show?
No.
No. Predictions when this was put on the list. What were your predictions, Brice?
Well, I didn't know anything about the mass killings either.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know how much act of killing was going to be a part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I didn't have much predictions going in, but I was just kind of blown away by reality here.
Yeah. James, what about you, man?
Yeah, I didn't have any predictions at all on it. I just started I'm used to reading subtitles, so I watch anime, and I also watch a certain movie that's in Russian, so I'm used to reading things, but what I was reading was just like, dang, really?
Yeah.
Wow. But
yeah, I literally don't think I had a single prediction going into this. I know that I was surprised, and probably the most surprising thing to me was just the casual nature in which the men of this film discuss some of the most horrifying murders I've ever heard about. Real life murders. Now, I admit I enjoy a good, action, I don't mind gory movies. I don't mind that, but it completely hits you differently when you know it's not just a guy blowing smoke, a guy just trying to be tough. It's people talking about literal things that they had done, brutal things that they had done. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So we'll talk about some of our favorite, if we have it, or least favorite details about the act of killing. But first, I'm going to attempt to give a real quick synopsis of this film, and you guys chime in if you feel like I'm missing something or anything like that. The Act of Killing is an uncomfortable documentary that takes a look into the lives of the perpetrators, or should I say murderers, from the Indonesian mass killings of 1965 and 66. So these guys were once petty criminals. They were part of the cinema. They were like cinema ticket scalpers who went on to become leaders of one of the most powerful death squads during an anti-communist purge, which ultimately led to the death of somewhere between 500,000 and 2 million suspected quote-unquote communists, sympathizers, alleged leftists, and ethnic Chinese people in Indonesia. I was a little shocked by the difference, I guess, in statistics. Depending on where I read, it was anywhere from 500,000 to 2 million suspected people were killed.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, it's a lot. It's
we'll never get that full number.
No, and because so much of this was happening, as we saw, as they talked about, these things were done in little dark alleys and corners and rooftops, and they were all just, like, man, that rooftop especially, like, jeez. Anyway, the filmmakers asked these killers to reenact some of their killings by producing films in various different Hollywood cinema styles. The result was a wild look into the minds of these men and a terrifying realization that many of the ideals from this time are still alive and well today in that part of the world. What did you guys think of the asking these killers to relive these scenarios as Hollywood movies? Why the hell did they do this? What was the point of this?
I think it's like two parts. They got the story out on how the murders happened and everything else. And on top of that, they had a love for American films and things like that. So I think by them reacting and everything out, they felt justified by doing that in some kind of way, some type of weird way.
Yeah, I guess I just mean the request of a filmmaker, and he was an American filmmaker, Josh Oppenheimer, to say, let's relive some of this in in film. I just found it very strange, and I got to imagine it was for cinematic value and to, maybe portray it in a way that was, I don't know if digestible is the right term. I don't know.
Maybe
I think because Anwar was such a film guy that he, loved Elvis movies and all that, and kind of Western culture, that would be kind of the go-to way of getting the stories from him.
That's true.
Getting him to open up.
Yeah, because I mean, he's watched American movies his whole life, wanted to be a part of it, so now's his chance, and it's his own life stories.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. We also find out that many people and institutions directly involved in these killings took over or remained in power. Those who carried out the killings were never held accountable for things that are now considered to be violations of the Geneva Convention, and they still hold positions of power and respect today. We're shown the casual nature in which people rationalize and boasted about their participation in these killings. The violence, the threats of violence, the extortion, and a whole bunch of other crimes continue today with little to no repercussions. One primary subject of the documentary is a former death squad leader named Anwar Congo, who we see teeter back and forth between pride, nonchalance, and disgust as he's haunted by the violence that happened at his own hands. So to me, that's kind of the synopsis of the movie. It really focuses primarily on Congo and his little group, and a weird, and this, I kind of thought throughout this that there may be some things that get lost in translation as far as body language and how to read people and all that, because, I have spent some time overseas, and cultural differences are a real thing when, you're talking about how people react to things, how people respond to things. So it was a little difficult, if we're watching a documentary about, Ted Bundy or, John Wayne Gacy or something, and we're watching film from them, and we can kind of read whether or not they feel remorse or whether they seem like they do, or, how they're feeling about the horrible things that they've done or have done. Where here, I wonder how much we're missing just because there may be some different cultural things, but what a wild documentary overall. I mean, this was just the mix of violent stories and the strangeness of these kind of half-assed Hollywood movies that they made, where the actors in these films are mass murderers, people that did actually by their own hands killed people relentlessly and with pride. It's a wild paradox. And I don't think I ever thought that I would see something like this, because normally when you see footage of someone talking about the killings that they've done, it's like they're wearing an orange jumpsuit and they're in prison, the handcuffs on, and you're kind of wondering how much of this is being played up, how much, and it's, oh my gosh, this guy, I'm so glad we caught him. These guys haven't been caught. They're still...
They're celebrities.
Yeah, very much so. And that's just it's
still, as I watched the film, I was talking to Brice about, did you see that? These guys are literally going on film to different store owners and taking money from them. Store right in front of you that day. You can see the guy, he tried to laugh, but you can see the disapproval of the homeowner, shop owners and stuff like that. They were like, yeah, that's not enough money. Give me more. So he had to go back and get more money to give them. That's not enough neither. So
you got more than that. You got more than that.
Yeah, like, wow.
Yeah.
Are they really doing this on TV? Wow, they still gangsters.
Yeah.
The killing is not there. At least I believe the killing is not there.
Right.
But they could kill someone in the street and still get away with it just
yeah.
no problem. Like,
no doubt.
I mean, at the beginning of that film, when they're walking around in their ugly orange camouflage and
it was ugly.
Yeah. And they're, trying to find these people to act like they're burning down the house. And you could see the like hesitation on everyone's face. But at the same time, they did it because it was one of I mean, gangster is literally the only term you can use because it's that, I know that you might be okay right now, but I know if I make you mad that's going to end up bad for me.
Like a dictatorship.
And they want people to play communists, which these guys killed thousands
of. So here, act like a communist. Like, no.
No, thank you.
Yeah, no, because and I should point out that much of what they stated was that many of the people that were quote unquote communists probably didn't identify as that at all.
Yep.
They just might have been a little bit more liberal in their thinking or not.
Right.
Or it was just someone that one of the random people, whether it was the newspaper publisher or what, decided that should die.
Right. And that's exactly right. It's like whoever was in power said, hey, they're communists. Okay, let's just take care of them.
Yeah.
Just like that. There was no proof. I'm like, wow.
No trial, no proof, no nothing. It was just, and they'll beat it out of you.
Right.
Like, there's your trial. We're going to beat you until you admit to something you probably didn't do anyway. I mean, this had shades of the Holocaust written all over it with the, genocidal, a genocide. I don't know how else to say it because that's essentially what you were trying to do. And, it was pretty awful. So the main character of the film, Anwar Congo, like I said, a former small-time cinema ticket scalper, he became one of the most notorious death squad leaders during the military coup. For lack of a better term, he really rose to that challenge of being the communist executioner. One of the more interesting characters is a man named Herman Koto. He was the fat gangster, aka the bearded lady, the extravagant dresses, the makeup, the wild overacting, and a couple scenes that just disturbed me about him. You guys remember when he was brushing his teeth in this movie?
Yeah. Yes. Oh my God. I'm like, what the heck is this?
Who the hell brushes their teeth like
slobbing
that?
all on himself, foaming like he's a mad dog.
Yeah, he has his shirt off.
Yeah, this
his giant belly
bigger than the
and copious amounts.
Horse.
Yeah, of toothpaste or whatever that was, falling out into his own fat belly. And
getting buckets of water.
And he's gagging himself.
Right.
And then he'll take a drink of this water and spit it right out onto his belly.
Right. I'm like, what?
It was so gross.
I had to tell Brice about that. I'm like, Brice, man, what is this?
That's a heck of a morning routine.
Like this.
Yeah, what?
And then the next scene, he's with his kid, sitting all nice and clean and everything else.
Yeah, he was running for an office or something. Yeah. And admittedly saying that he wanted to run for office. I think he was running for like parliament or something.
Right. He was running for parliament.
And he wanted to do it because of money and power. I mean, he's just straight up telling people like, when you're in that power, you get a whole bunch of money and respect and whatever you want. God. There was another scene that was very pointless, but I think kind of broke us out of what was happening. The scene prior was when he was banging on the drums and just screaming for no reason. He's a cartoon character for sure. A terrifying cartoon character, but a cartoon character nonetheless.
I might point out one thing I did like about this movie.
Okay.
Is that the guy was a sharp dresser. There's not one time where he didn't have any. It was leather jackets.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know if he got that from some type of like Black Panther movie he might have seen in an American film or whatever. But he was always a smooth dresser no matter what. Minus the pink cowboy hat, But that was still fancy too. On top of that,
Yeah. The making of the movies within this film that we kind of talked about. So not the one that we watched, but the propaganda movie created to remind the Indonesian people of how horrible, quote unquote, the communists were and why the military state is the best, and that there's, still a paramilitary organization that controls some of the highest ranking government officials. That was wild. It's propaganda films. They're making these films, at the beginning when they're not the films that they're recreating, but there was like a film that was made to remind the upcoming children of communists, quote unquote, that this is what happens when you rise up. This is what happens. And they're the most, brutal that they could do. It looked cheesy to me because it was pretty low grade special effects and all that, with the woman wiping the blood all over her face and everything.
That was nuts.
But this was the film that Anwar and Kodo were saying that made them feel justified.
Yeah.
Right.
There was the only thing that doesn't make me feel bad about it is when I watch that movie and I feel justified. I feel like I was doing the right thing. I feel like, there's 3 million members in the Pancasila Youth. This is the orange camouflage. They're touted as heroes of the country for exterminating these communists for genocide. And this organization is still today in Indonesia. As a matter of fact, the governor, the vice president of the country, a newspaper publication, and a whole bunch of other high-ranking government officials are a part of this organization and openly and loudly show their support. It's really scary. I mean, you've got the police, the military, and then these thugs who openly say, and who they use the term gangster as like a term of endearment.
Right.
You've got the vice president of the country saying, you guys are the gangsters and we need the gangsters to be the muscle.
Right. To keep order, to keep things right.
Because there's certain things that you can't do if you're a bureaucracy. And, there's certain things that you just can't get done. And keeping communists at bay is one of those things. And these guys are, like cheering that on. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't realize that this still went on in the world.
Yeah.
Like call me a naive American, but to see this type of behavior still I mean, I knew that there was less than terrific government, there was there's places that may not be as good to the people as you would hope they were, but seeing it in this light was pretty harrowing.
I think I was only 3 years old when that happened.
Right.
And wow. And it was not mentioned at all, and nothing was,
No. And that's an interesting thing to me too, is how much time were spent, in school talking about things like the Holocaust. And of course we should, because that is a dark time in history, but it makes me wonder, and hopefully we don't get pulled off the air for saying things like this, but you start to wonder about, why are we not told about this? Why does this have to come out through a private filmmaker to show us these things? Like, is it because of the involvement of our government? Is it, whether it's the involvement of or the allowance to do these things?
I think that's a large part of it,
right?
Because I was reading somewhere that there was a CIA or something dossier that was released that showed our government knew about it and supported it. these mass killings.
Yeah.
And at the time, the Cold War's going.
Right.
And we just had, Joseph McCarthy was a senator calling everyone communists and businesses being shut down, people being locked up.
And sometimes, sorry, Bryson.
Yeah,
sometimes, when we agree with something, we can easily overlook how devastating something can be. And, back in that time, communists, and even in America, was the worst thing you could ever be.
Yeah.
So if somebody was killing communists in another country, well, okay, we could look the other way.
Right. And I think that's a good point because, the Red Scare was a thing. The media was putting out, especially during the Cold War, of how horrible this was, which come to find out, it was a very, inclusive way of thinking. And there's a lot of people that I consider to be friends that, do fall into a more, I don't want to say communist because of the connotations that come along with it, but sort of a lean toward that being their ideals and things like that, which, like James was saying, at that time, it was demonized around the world. And if you think that you're saying, if you think that you're able to, well, that part of the country is taking care of their own communists, so we don't have to worry about that. I'd hate to think that we knew exactly how and what was happening, but it's hard to believe that our government probably didn't have some idea of what was going on. They just maybe decided that they had bigger things to worry about at the time, which, that's not an easy thing to.
Yeah, and plus that was, like I say, that was another country, so that was their issue.
Mm-hmm.
And America, I'm not anti-American at all, but they always got their nose into somebody else's business. But in this case, they must have had clean noses because they just didn't pay any attention. Like I said, I was 3 years old. I never heard of it at all until this day. After watching this documentary, I never heard anything about this.
I know.
All those people that's killed just because, some of them.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
we had our own anti-communist propaganda movies out, so there wasn't going to be any sympathy from America. So
no, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
James, what stood out to you about this film, man? What was something that keeps playing through your head?
His friend that he met from the airport.
Okay.
His friend told him that, he was telling him how he had bad dreams and things happening and everything. He said, yeah, it's because you got a weak mind. Basically, yep. I'm like, wow. So this dude is telling you that he having nightmares and all the killings that he done and how he feel, and then you turn around and tell him, that's because your mind is weak. Like, wow.
Yeah, he straight up said, you might need to go see a neurologist because your mind's just weak. You must have some sort of nerve disturbance.
Right. I'm like, okay.
If you're feeling guilt for this. He did mention too that, and that friend's name was Addie something. He believes that these murders were not truly crimes. He does not feel guilt at all. He justifies it because it is what was right and it was war. He claims to not be haunted by it. He said if he ever was told that he needed to go to court and be held responsible, he'd gladly do it because it would make him famous.
Right. He even compared it to America. A lot of stuff they compare to what America has done. Like they said, what did they do to the people that killed the Indians? Did they weren't punished? No. I'm like, oh. And then you got to think, oh, okay, well. So you look at it like that, okay. Then,
he's kind of got a point if you're looking at it from that.
But everybody gonna try to justify themselves for their wrongdoings anyway.
Right.
This killing people like that is wrong from the beginning. I'm not one of those people that advocate that murder is the perfect thing for solving the problem, because it is not. So
yeah, and I think about when he says it was war and that's what we did. I'm like, no, I'm calling bullshit on that, because our veterans who have gone to combat and to war and all that, like, they still feel, I mean, that's what PTSD is. That's why so many people are, there are certain coping mechanisms that men and women will, put up in order to try to make peace with what they're doing. But also that was, and that's actual war, where you're in a quote unquote battlefield and all that. Like, this is you pulling innocent people off the streets into a dark rooftop and strangling them to death, because you don't believe with what they're doing. There was no general giving you an order that came from your highest level of government. You're being told by the guy who publishes a newspaper that this guy's a communist and he needs to die. Like, that's not war. That's terrorism. That's, that's genocide. And so yeah. Anyway, I think, so we talk about the movie is called The Act of Killing. It's a little bit of a play on words, because the act is, movies, but also, that is what these guys did. A little, just in order to try to feel some of the true gravity of this film, I'm going to mention some of the ways that they talked about, and disgustingly with pride most of the time, ways that they killed people. Congo said that when it first started, what they did was to beat them to death. He said that there was too much blood and the smell was terrible. So they felt like they had to find better ways, quote unquote, to do it. Which then they introduced what was surely his recurring favorite that he kept going to, and that was the use of the metal wire. Mm-hmm. They would tie the wire to something stable. He said like a pipe. They'd wrap it around the person's neck and tie the other end to something they could grab, like a piece of wood, and then they'd pull. And he proudly said, you just do it like that, and it's much less messy, and then you drag them off and you bring in the next person. They threw people off of bridges. They said they would swing them by their hands and feet, and when they threw them off, they said they looked like beautiful parachutes. I mean, they're literally standing on the bridge that they were throwing people off of.
Pointing out every place. Right. Well, I killed them here. I killed them here. I killed them here.
This building is haunted. This river is haunted. Right. That's just a recurring theme.
They mentioned stabbing every Chinese person that they saw.
Yep, just stabbing them. You Chinese stab. Yep. Chinese stab.
One of the guys, I think it was Addy, said that the girl he was dating had a Chinese father who he claimed to have killed.
Right.
Which is insane. There was beheadings. One of the kind of more difficult parts, I think, was setting the leg of a table on someone's throat, and then they had like 3 or 4 people sitting on top, and they'd sing a song.
Watch TV.
They're sitting out on the balcony, right? And people are walking through the street, and they are sitting on this table on this guy's neck,
right, until he dies, and then they pull him out and they bring in the next guy. Yep. They ran them over with cars. They mentioned shoving wood into a person's anus until they died. Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, quote, "We murdered and we were allowed to do it. We were never punished. I have never felt guilty about it, or have I lost any sleep over it." I think it was Addy who said that.
Most likely it was him.
The fact that you can murder in those type of ways you know, I hate to show any kind of justification for any of the mass murderings at all, but if it's like I mentioned, if it's if you're ordered to do it, I guess, if it's a quick and painless thing, and I still have trouble even saying those things, but like, I guess if I'm trying really hard, I can see where you could justify that in your own head as being something right, something, that you were supposed to do. But to do it in these way, in what kind of sick mind does shoving wood inside of somebody until they die?
Exactly.
Is that a justified and righteous killing?
Right. This is where I look at that and I say, no, these people were enjoying killing, period. Because if you were in an army, you had to kill somebody. Like when they had what was it, the hangings or the firing squad, those were methods used to just kill them for the criminal act that they done.
Right.
I believe to be done. No one was standing behind them. Okay, I'm going to stick this up his rectum while I hang them, doing some stupid stuff.
Sing a song while I'm choking you out.
None of that stuff. This was pleasurable things done by them, or were their minds so mentally disturbed where they decided, I'm just going to just do it like this.
Yeah, and they said that it was American movies that gave them new ideas.
Right.
They liked watching. And when I think about that, when I think about the movies from the 1960s that I've watched, whether it's like Old West movies or
John Wayne.
Yeah. And I think that movie that I watched as a kid or as an adult and watch an older movie could have influenced the way one of these people were murdered. That's like, man, that makes me rethink a lot of the ways that I watch TV and movies, because, I'll admit, like when I know that it's not real, I'm the guy to go, oh, that was so cool. that the way he threw him off the bridge or whatever, because I know that it was a green screen and he was thrown into a foam pit and he's fine. And it was a cool way to do it. But when you know that was something that really happened and was influenced by that, it affected me.
Right.
And
but this is America. Yeah. In America, we have such freedoms as that we have those understandings and we can differentiate, determine what is real and what is not, and not make it our personal, like, oh, I'm going to do this, I don't know how many times I watched Bruce Lee ran outside and started kicking in the air and everything, like, wow. And then I went and did my homework,
Yep. Yeah. So Anwar Congo states that he is haunted by nightmares. He even portrays one of the nightmares in the film where the people who he killed came back and killed him, if I'm interpreting that correctly. He states that things like singing, dancing, alcohol, marijuana, ecstasy, those are the things he uses to try to cope with or forget all the killings he has done. So poor Anwar has to dance and sing in order to forget these awful things that he's done. Fuck you, dude. They say he personally probably killed at least 1,000 people, and that's not the ones he ordered his men to kill. That's by his own hands, at least 1,000 people. But one thing that stood out to me is when they're focusing on Anwar, they asked that newspaper editor or that publication or whatever about Anwar, and he was just kind of like, "Why are you even focusing on him? He's one of dozens and more that have done the exact same thing. Like, he's no different. He's just one of many."
Yep, he just bring it to light.
Yeah, he's just the one we're watching in this film, and he happens to be one that claims to be feeling some kind of remorse for the killing that he's done. Brice, anything standing out to you, man? Anything that you feel like we need to dive into a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, just with Anwar, like, I guess it's hard to watch in the sense that in one scene, he's talking about these nightmares, or he's talking about, oh, this is haunted, and he's talking about all these gruesome things. And then in the next scene, he's petting these ducks, or he's playing with his grandson. Yep. And then towards the end of the movie, he's like having his grandson wake up, get out of bed so he can watch grandpa be strangled in this movie.
See how good I am at acting? Yes. Get out of bed and watch this. Like, what the hell, dude?
And then it's so like back and forth, where I think he at moments is trying to like convince himself to feel,
I think you're right,
feel bad, but I don't think he does. I don't think it's landed.
Right. I think you're right. I think his taking responsibility for that, he probably knows that it doesn't feel great when he thinks about what he did, but I don't think he really realizes how terrible that was.
Yeah.
You know, and how wrong he was for doing that. You know, one of the things that occurred to me, I guess, when watching this, do you guys think that there was any risk at the time, at the beginning in 1965, when they were looking for people to be on these killing squads? They mentioned Anwar was the guy who was scalping tickets, and that was kind of what he did. And did he have a choice? Do you think? I mean, there's no wrong answers because we weren't there, but do you think that there was a risk at that time of somebody saying, well, if you're not willing to do this, you must be a sympathizer, and then you're going to die? Do you feel like there's any sympathy, I guess, for lack of a better term, that can be given because of that?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think he had a choice, and I think he chose to do it because it was easy money.
Yeah.
And he,
power,
wasn't bothered by it.
Right.
Given his background, I think the same way,
Yeah. And I would tend to agree. And Brice, we actually talked about this a little bit earlier. And, you mentioned that, look, there's all these people that weren't killed, as long as you're not showing communist leaning and things like that, I don't know that you're necessarily at risk of being killed. Now, who knows what he was told? And, truthfully, you'd like to say, well, I'd rather die than be the leader of a death squad. I'd never been put in that situation, so I'm not trying to say that this is what I would do. But, clearly there were people that were not death squad leaders in Indonesia at that time. So you couldn't have just gone and continued doing what you're doing, or doing, something else.
I think he could have. I think he could have just lived his life. He's not left leaning or communist or Chinese or anything like that. And then someone else would have just been in the same spot, done the same thing.
Mm-hmm. They would have found someone to do it.
Right.
Yeah. Because there was probably over 1 million some people that died, and we can account for like 1,000 with him.
Right. So insane. I want to talk about that scene where he was with his grandson and the duckling. It was so wild to watch him coaching or, instructing his grandson to be compassionate to this duck. He makes his grandson apologize to the duck for accidentally hurting him. He makes him realize that, he was being too rough with him, and he hurt the duckling, and now the duckling is whatever. So he made him apologize. And he literally said, you need to apologize to the duck. Like, it's such a strange exchange, because he very clearly knows what compassion is. He knows what, mercy is. But this is the same person that literally put all his weight onto a person's neck without any regard.
Smiled and laughed while he did it.
Right. Smoking cigarettes and drinking while he's doing that. I just, that was just such a strange
Yeah, they just got grossed into it, man. They just love the power of what they received and the respect that they thought they was given, even though it was all based out of fear.
Right.
They just were up on top of it.
Yeah. These guys were hungry for power. They were hungry for the more archaic kind of spoils of war kind of thing where they, you know, that's what this felt like to me. This felt like an old, you know, something you'd read in like a medieval novel or some fantasy novel where the rape and pillage of, you know, and you know, no one holding them accountable or anything like that to this day. In one of the scenes where Congo is watching back the films, which is kind of an interesting thing that they did, they would record these films to portray what was going on back in the 60s. But in most of them, they would kind of take turns of who played the victim and who played the perpetrator in each of those. And then the next scene, Congo would be in a chair with Herman sitting on the ground or in another chair, and they'd be watching back the film that they made and commenting on their acting and all of that. In one of the scenes, he gets to the mobster scene where he's playing the victim and he's being beaten and strangled. And he struggled while he was filming this. He kept making them stop. They kept having to get him water because as soon as the wire was wrapped around his neck, he was like, I can't do this anymore. And he'd have to take a break and all that. And this is the scene where Brice mentioned he wakes up one of his grandsons and makes him watch it because he goes from feeling like what seemed like he was feeling so much guilt for what he had done. And then he's proud of how it turned out. So he woke up his grandson and he's like, did you see the people I tortured? You know, did you see your grandpa's being, you know, strangled there? Like, aren't you proud? And the kid's like, yeah, it's like one of his, I think they were both his grandkids or whatever, was like looking like, what is this? But anyway, he makes a comment after the kids kind of walk away. He says, did the people I tortured feel the way I did there? And he kind of, you know, resonates with, or he kind of just ruminates on that for a while. He says, I can feel what the people I tortured felt because in this scene, my dignity was destroyed. Then fear comes right then and there and suddenly possessed my body. So this motherfucker says, I clearly know what they felt now. I know the fear that they felt. And Josh Oppenheimer, I'm assuming it was him or a producer or something behind the camera, comments, actually the people you tortured felt way worse because you knew this was a film and that you were in no real danger. The people you tortured knew they were going to die. And he looks a little puzzled, Anwar does, after he mentions that, kind of like, agree to disagree kind of deal, because he says, but I could feel it, Josh. I did this to so many people. It's all coming back to me and I don't want it to. And he's kind of rubbing his forehead and like saying it's all coming back to me. And it's like, dude, let it come back to you. Because if you think that had anything in common with the people that you killed, and that you can now somehow sympathize or what's the word I'm looking for?
Relate.
Yeah, relate. Thank you. To them, you know, that you clearly have a twisted idea of what you were doing.
Yeah, I think he was just acting in front of the people saying that
too.
Because if you watch, when he was watching one of the films, he said he was so upset with himself because when he showed how he killed somebody, he did it wrong in the film. He said, I wrong. And then, look, I don't wear white pants.
I would never wear white pants.
I mean, those
Only
type of comments right there, you don't sympathize. You just, that's you know. You kill it because you want to. I mean, it can get you upset a little bit, you know, because you go back and forth. I mean, you could bring it all the way to America. You could say, with me, you know, it's not personal with me, but if I was living back in my time in America, this people, I was explaining to y'all too earlier about the lynchings and stuff,
Yeah.
and how they had books where everybody was smiling and happy. We don't even use the word barbecue, because barbecue is when they used to bring people, go look for a guy of a different ethnic race, and put it that way. Same way it is in the documentary, and it's just barbecue 'em. So I don't use the word barbecue anymore.
Man, I had no
just
idea
because
that
of
was,
that.
that was even a thing.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was the scene too, when after he says, but I can feel it. Then it cuts to Herman on the drums for no reason, and I honestly think that they put that in to break the tension of that scene, and probably because there was so many probably scenes of Herman and everyone else that they felt they needed to get in the film somehow. So they used that at the good time. It's like, dum, 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 dum. Yeah, okay, all right, whatever. Probably, in my opinion, the most satisfying moment of the film was also the most difficult to watch, especially if you had the sound turned up. So Anwar goes back to the roof. So as James mentioned at the beginning of this film, we were dealing with, or we were watching, I guess, Anwar recreate some of the killing, and he was saying, I would have never been laughing. I would have never worn white pants. I would have never done that. Well, he goes back to that same roof toward the end of the film, and where he killed so many innocent people. This is where he's wearing a mustard yellow suit with a bright colored shirt underneath, and he states finally that I knew it was wrong. He of course tries to justify it and says, but I had to do it. But he says, I knew it was wrong. And he begins retching over and over and over again. And I couldn't help myself but going, yeah, motherfucker, feel that shit. Feel it. I hope you retch for the rest of your life, and he says words like, why did I have to kill them? I had to kill. My conscience told me they had to be killed. Like he's reasoning with himself, trying to, convince himself that he had to do it. But at the same time, he's just retching over and over again. He grabs that wire and he says that this is one of the easiest ways to take a human life. He grabs that burlap sack and he says, this was used to take away human beings that we killed, because without this, too many people would know what we were doing. So he does show also that they knew that there was stuff happening that maybe the general public didn't know about. And I kind of wonder too, because at one point they were kind of razzing on the one dude who was, said he knew what was going on, but they kind of called him out like, dude, you weren't even there.
Right.
Like, don't call yourself one of the killers.
Say he's a nobody. Yeah.
You were a nobody and no one really cared. And you didn't know whatever. And the guy claims to not have known what was going on.
And he was a journalist.
Yeah. And he was a journalist and they're going, you knew, but I wonder how much of it was kept hidden, because he did mention in that one piece where the burlap sacks were to take people out. Otherwise, too many people would know. Know what? That you're up here killing innocent people, or, what? So anyway, that was and then he continues to retch, and he retches violently, which, again, kind of was a satisfying thing to watch, even though it was disgusting as well. My question to you guys, and I think that this is something that it's hard for me to not try to sympathize with main characters of films. Did you guys feel any... Okay, first of all, do you think that they tried to paint Anwar specifically as a sympathetic character?
I don't think so.
I don't either.
I think they just tried to get the stories from him.
Yeah.
Same here.
You don't think that they were hoping or maybe trying to paint him in a light that maybe people could be rooting for him in some way?
No.
I think just because he was a celebrity so much already
Yeah.
that they weren't really going for that. And I think to try and like have him viewed as this guy who has this remorse kind of goes against kind of the propaganda that the country wants to release.
Right. So you're saying that him being shown as having remorse would potentially do the opposite of sympathize for him?
I think so.
Maybe with their people, but not from America's point of view.
And I agree with you. I think that's I'm sorry to cut you off, but
That's fine.
But it's very much depends on who's watching it. I did, and I will admit, when I was watching it, I had to remind myself several times that this was a guy who brutally murdered innocent people, because I did feel myself starting to slip into man, it must be hard to have that on your conscience, and it would be. But there are certain things, certain atrocities, I guess, that if you commit, I don't necessarily think that you should be able to come back from that. And maybe that, sounds heartless or whatever, but fuck it. He was heartless. And, I kind of had a feeling, and I maybe just disagree a little bit. I sort of feel like maybe there was a piece of the documentary or in the filmmaking process that they tried to paint him as a sympathetic character, because cinema, with more specifically, TV, a lot of times glorifies a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
We have TV shows, whether you're watching Breaking Bad or, where there's drug dealers who are the good guys, essentially, but they're criminals. They're killing people. You've got, whether it's Peaky Blinders or Sons of Anarchy or Dexter or, Prison Break, or even like Loki, for example. These are bad guys that are put into a sympathetic role, and you end up rooting for them in all of these. And those are only a small bit of the, what's out there. But when it's real life, do we sympathize with them? I don't, if I zoom back, but I did feel it because of it being put on a film and because of it being shot in a way that he was the main character. We're not used to seeing any kind of film that the main character isn't who you should be rooting for. That's just not how the hero's journey, quote unquote, is made to make a successful film or movie.
I do think that a lot of stuff that happened with this guy became natural to him. Living where I live, sometimes, where you hear shotgun fire, you used to jump. But after hearing it so often, you don't jump. You just learn.
Like desensitized.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that, I think, happened to him.
Yeah.
But still.
Happened to him at his own doing. The desensitization, I guess, for the people around that know the killing's happening, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But
right.
for the people doing the killing or shooting the shotgun in your neighborhood or whatever it may be, you're the reason people are becoming desensitized to it. So,
and the same feeling, man, that when you shooting that gun, it's like, I got power, people are going to respect me, that type of thing. This is why I'm doing it. And I think that's the same emotional feeling that he probably started off having, but I don't see him with no type of regret. I don't care what he did. I don't care,
Yeah.
No.
So credits roll to the strange music and Herman Kodo in a pink dress and thick makeup dancing with the Indonesian girls.
Waterfall in the background.
Yep. how are you guys feeling when credits roll? You just finished this difficult, heavy, wild ride. What are you guys feeling, Brice?
Oh man, a mix of emotions, I think.
Yeah,
because that's like their shot that they wrapped the movie they were making with. And Anwar is saying, I like the waterfall in the background. It gives it such deep meaning.
Meaning of what?
And that's what I'm thinking. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't give it much meaning. It's, you're all dressed up, dancing next to this waterfall, and you have people dressed up like
the
communists
that
you murdered, taking off their the wires around their necks and putting a medal on you and thanking you for killing them.
Right.
And that's the movie you're putting into the world.
Yeah,
fuck you and any of the guilt that you say that you feel. If that's what you're putting out there, like if you truly felt guilty, if you truly felt remorse, all you're feeling is disgust, maybe, because you know how awful it was, but you don't regret it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just crazy.
The same nonchalant thing at the end of the movie as it was the way they were thinking throughout the movie.
Exactly.
It's the same stuff, you know.
Yep.
Waterfalls, beautiful. Let me go kill this person.
Yep.
Oh, I like the boats. Let me go kill this person. Oh, the ducks are pretty.
And they're probably thanking me for it.
Right.
Like, get out of here. I also felt some shock, and we talked about this a little bit toward the beginning, because I'd never heard of this. I mean, this is genocide. This is a Holocaust. You know, this happened in James's lifetime,
right?
In our parents' lifetime. You know, we hardly know about it. Nazis, for example, are shunned, and but the Panicilla youth are still active.
Still active.
You know, that'd be like there still being people with swastikas on their jacket, loud and proud, marching around in Germany.
Yeah, like you said, they're still, if they find a Nazi that did all the killings and stuff, he has to pay for that.
Right.
You know, he has to pay for that.
Right. So I did a little bit of research, and Anwar Congo did die in 2019. So he is no longer alive. He died in the hospital at age 78. His wife said her husband had been suffering from many illnesses, including a pinched nerve. But he rarely complained about his health. Just a week before his death, he hadn't mentioned anything about his illnesses. He just stated that he was tired. So this makes me wonder if maybe he didn't feel justified to complain. I'd like to think that, maybe you didn't feel maybe you can't complain about it because you know that what kind of sympathy should you have after the torture that you inflicted on so many. Mm-hmm. In reality, he's probably too proud for his own good and too tough, quote unquote. And to that I say, bye, bitch. But was this well made? Did you guys the documentary itself, put aside the heavy nature of the doc, did you feel like it was well made?
I like it. It brought a lot of things to light, so I really like the content. Like I said, I didn't like how it was made, but I did like what they were talking about, the subject matter.
Okay, so you didn't think it was very well made?
No, I didn't think it was very well. Sorry about that.
Brice,
I think it was well made for what it is. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to it, so it's not like they could really edit it down a whole lot.
Right.
But I think for what it is, it was well made.
Yeah. I have to agree with Brice. I think it was well made. I think that having them to tell this story by asking them to make mini movies to portray the horrors that they did to other people, I think that was kind of a genius move, because I think it made them believe they were telling their hero's journey, their hero's story, but it just added to, not only a chilling telling of that story, instead of them just sitting down and saying, well, we did this and we did this, we got to see it in the way that they maybe saw it in their own heads, as opposed to just speaking it and we have to interpret that. But it also made for some pretty brilliant visuals throughout that they got to pepper through there, most of which involved Herman Koto in some sort of drag. Tune in next week for the Paris is Burning documentary episode to drag that's actually not disgusting like Herman Koto was. The quiet nature of the film, lots of shots of Congo kind of laying in his bed, just sort of reflecting, playing with that weird little duck that was on his chest was strange. There was a lot of depth. Again, those were the parts where I kind of wondered if it wasn't trying to make him a sympathetic character, but I'm kind of seeing where you guys are coming from. What about a message? Was there a message that they were trying to convey?
I don't know. I think it was just, I think the overall message is just viewing this very unique person, because like I didn't know anything about these killings. No. And then I also didn't know that there would be, this celebrity that killed 1,000 people with his hands. So I think the message is just that this was really fucked up, and here you go.
Yeah. James, anything to add to that?
No, I don't have anything to add to that. That was what Brice said was pretty much on point there.
If I were to have said if there's a kind of a heartbeat, it's that evil still exists, and probably always will. Horrible things have been done in the name of government and for reasons that we probably don't and won't ever know. And that there's a lot of crimes in the world that have never been paid for, and probably never will. So it's pretty disheartening. All right. So I think we've gone over that enough. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about some ratings. We need to give an official documentary rating where each crew member scores the documentary on a scale of 1 to 10 items, with 1 being as god-awful as Anwar Congo's movie makeup and 10 being as wonderful as the Indonesian dancers, I guess, because that was pretty much the only good thing about the movie. The item that we chose for this week is pink cowboy hats, because Anwar wore a big dumb pink cowboy hat and thought he looked really cool when he was making his Western film. So pink cowboy hats it is. I'll start. I gave a 6. I didn't like watching this. I'll never watch it again, most likely. But it did open my eyes to something that happened in the world. It was informative, which I think documentaries generally should be, but it wasn't by any means my favorite or anything like that. So 6. James, what do you think, man?
I gave it a 5 pink cowboy hats.
Okay. Why?
Yeah. Like I said, I like the subject matter what they talked about, but I just didn't like the move, like it at all. The documentary itself, it was cheesy, but the
Brice?
subject was good.
I gave it a solid 7 cowboy hats.
Okay. So many cowboy hats.
Yeah. I think it's something that makes you feel something, and it also educates you. So I think in a documentary sense, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. All right. So we take all those cowboy hats and we average them together, and we come up with 6 pink cowboy hats for the act of killing as the official documentary rating. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out with me this week and diving into yet another documentary. Let's talk about next week's episode. For next week, in celebration of the start of Pride Month, the crew will be having a ball. A drag ball, that is. We're going to travel back to the 80s with the documentary released in 1990 called Paris is Burning. We're going to take a look at the golden age of New York City drag ball culture and the African-American, Latino, gay, and transgender communities that were involved in it. Either of you guys seen Paris is Burning?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Nope.
All right. I'm excited to get into this one. I admittedly Don't know much about drag culture. What little I do know, I appreciate the confidence, the fashion, and most of all, the kind of community that revolves around that or surrounds that. So I'm excited to get into this one. Everyone who's listening, go out and check out the documentary Paris is Burning before next week's episode. It can be streamed on Home Box Office Max. That's HBO Max. Join us next week as I break out my favorite dress, some platform heels, and glittery eyeshadow, and do my best Vogue one documentary at a time. Go out, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite podcast streaming services, and let us know what you think of our show. If you want to connect with us, look for us at Talkumentary Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, or you can email us at info.talkumentary@gmail.com. On behalf of DJ, who's in the post-production booth listening to our beautiful voices, Mr. King James, Brice, and the entire Talkumentary family, I'm your host, Jeff Kolaski. I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you keep your minds open and be kind to each other, and stop killing people over in Indonesia, please, if you're still doing that.
Right.
All right.
Extortions.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't talk about the extorting of the Chinese that still was happening.
Yeah, that's still going on.
No,
I think I mentioned that.
Well, maybe you did mention it. All right, goodbye, everybody.
Oh, goodbye. Yeah.
Don't extort the Chinese.
The
arsonist had very odd feet.
The arsonist had very fard feet. Fart feet. The arsonist.